好，各位同事早晨。
Good morning, members. Now this is the second meeting of the Bills Committee on the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2013. It is different from the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012. Please bear this in mind. We have already formed a quorum. First item on the agenda. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of May. The Secretariat has sent out a draft to you. We haven't received any proposed amendments. Please confirm the minutes. Second, I would like to remind members that if the matter before us for deliberation, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest, before you speak, please disclose the nature of your pecuniary interest. I'm an accountant, so for the firm that employs me, does engage in taxation-related business. And Mr. Sheikh, I represent the property development sector. I'm a director of listed companies. I also own properties. Mr. Andrew Leung, myself and my company holds properties. Most of them are for self-use. The majority of them are for long-term investment. Mr. James Toh, myself and my spouse own properties. All right, this is the second meeting. This is the first time that the administration is walking us through the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2013. So, members and administration, if you are ready, let's get a briefing from the administration. We have already sent out the information received prior to the meeting to members. Administration, Mabel? Thank you. Madam Chair, good morning, Madam Chair and members. Well, earlier on, we have already sent out the electrical brief to members concerning the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2013. To prepare for today's meeting, and with your consent, we have already given you a copy of the salient points of our speech. I will highlight the main points, so I will be talking about the major features of the bill. First of all, the purpose of the bill, as the FS said on the 22nd of February 2013 when he announced the demand management measures, is to further deal with the overheating property market. In relation to the new round of demand management measures, we would like to prevent the risk of the property market escalating, thus jeopardizing macroeconomy and the stability of the financial system. While we try to achieve this policy objective, we would like to give priority to the housing needs of the permanent residents of Hong Kong. For the new round of management of demand facility initiatives, there are 2 points. First of all, we would like to increase the ad valorem stamp duty on transactions for residential and non-residential properties, and the adjusted ABD rate will range between 1.50% to 8.50% depending on the consideration. Secondly, we would like to advance the charging of ABD on non-residential property transactions from the conveyance on sale to the agreement for sale. This is to tally with the existing arrangement for residential properties when it comes to the charging of the ABD. As to the scope of application, it applies to both residential as well as non-residential properties. As I have said, in order to implement the policy to give priority to Hong Kong permanent residents in relation to their housing needs, would like to come up with 2 criteria for the exemption mechanism. First of all, if the purchaser is a Hong Kong permanent resident for the residential property, and on the date of acquisition, they are not the beneficial owner of any other properties, and therefore when the Hong Kong PR purchaser is to submit the transaction documents to the IRD for the purpose stamping, the buyer must declare that he is a PR and he isn't the beneficial owner of any other properties, residential in nature in Hong Kong, and then the IRD would verify the declaration. Eligible Hong Kong PR buyer may pay the AVD in accordance with the existing rates. We have consulted the relevant stakeholders, and the bill suggests that if declarations have been made and the AVD has been underpaid, that is, it has been proved that either the buyer at the time of acquisition of the residential property is not a Hong Kong PR, or they are the beneficial owner of other Hong Kong residential properties, then the difference between the new and the old AVD rates will be the liability of the buyer and not both the buyer and the seller. And I understand that Hong Kong permanent residents may want to change the properties, and then there will be a period when the person involved owns more than one residential property. In light of this, we would like to introduce a refund mechanism. That is, for Hong Kong PR selling his residential property, before he disposes of his residential property, if he's to acquire another residential property, then in the case of disposal then acquisition, then the new one will apply. But then, after completing the disposal transaction, and then within 2 years of the acquisition of the new property, application may be lodged with the IRD, and then in accordance with the procedures involved, the difference between the 2 rates will be refunded to the applicant. We have also taken into account the various exemptions given under the enhanced special stamp duty and the buyer stamp duty, and the LegCo is considering the relevant bills. We would like to make reference to the above arrangements, and then under specified circumstances there will be exemption or the refund of the difference between the 2 AVD rates. Since the 23rd of February 2013, that is the following day of the announcement of the procedure, we have been recording all the property transactions when enacted. The bill, when enacted, means that after the gazettal of the bill, the IRD will be issuing demand notes to demand the payment of the difference between the existing AVD rate and the adjusted AVD rate. We do understand that the property market is being influenced by different factors which are fluid, and we'll be watching the development of the property market. And if necessary, we need to make appropriate adjustments to the demand management initiatives. Therefore, we are going to introduce a mechanism to empower the FS to do the following. That is, through negative vetting of a subsidiary legislation, the tax ban of the AVD as well as the rate of the AVD can be adjusted so that we can come up with timely adjustments in the light of the property market developments. For non-residential properties, we're going to advance the charging of the AVD. This is mainly to align the arrangement with that applicable to the residential buildings. Therefore, should there be adjustments to the AVD rates, we will still be keeping the proposal to advance the charging of the AVD. We hope that the bill can be enacted ASAP so that we have the basis to enable the RRD to issue the demand notes for the underpaid AVD. And this will also give clarity to the stamp duty payer. So myself in the Bureau and the RRD colleagues will try our best to tie in with the work of the Bills Committee so that we can deal with the scrutiny of the bill quickly. Understand that for the effectiveness of our proposals in relation to the stabilization of the property market, you will be very interested. So I would like to ask Mrs. Kwok from the TsyB to talk about this issue.
Thank you. With your consent, Chairman, I have also given my opening remarks to members before the meeting. I think that members would also know very well that in October 2012 and also in February of this year, we rolled out 2 rounds of demand-side management measures. I wouldn't go into the background of those measures. In fact, in the electrical brief, we have already given a detailed account of the background of these measures. Now, I'd like to introduce to members of the Bills Committee the latest development of the private property market. We are of the view that these 2 rounds of demand-side management have been effective to a certain extent. In terms of short-term speculation, the short-term transaction cases for residential development in April 2013, including transfer by conformors and transfer within 24 months, that has dropped to 135 cases or 3.5% of total transaction. This is way below the long-term average figures between 1997 and 2010, meaning 1,570 cases or 17.1%. And in April 2013, the conformor cases has dropped to 14 cases. And compared to 12 months before the special measures, whereby the average was 321 cases on a monthly basis, it shows that the measures have been very effective. The BSD has been effective in suppressing non-local buyers' demand. After the BSD has been rolled out, we can see that non-local buyers, including company buyers as well, they have only accounted for 251 cases on an average monthly basis for the first 4 months of 2013 in terms of the buying of residential property, or just 4.4% of total transaction, which is way below the monthly average of 1,089 cases or 13.6% of total transactions between January and October 2012. And let us look at the overall private property transactions in February 2013, which is 6,307 cases, but then in March it dropped to 4,534 cases, a monthly drop of 28%, and in April it further dropped 24% to 3,427 cases. This is way below the last year's monthly average of 6,778 cases. And then in March 2013, property prices dropped by 0.1%. In April, it dropped another 0.7%. And in April, the prices for every kind of property has recorded different kinds of drop compared to February. However, when there is a still low interest and also adequate liquidity, the exuberance of the market might well reappear. We understand that these are extraordinary measures for an extraordinary time. We'll keep watch of the situation, and at the appropriate time we might consider revoking the measures. 2 members have registered the interest to speak. I would give each 5 minutes. There may be further rounds. Mr. Andrew Leung. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, my view on this bill is such that residential properties have been lumped together with commercial industrial property. This is not ideal. Residential property is for the purpose of inhabitation, but for commercial industrial properties, they are for the conduct of business and for the hire of employees. But it seems you are meting out a penalty on the commercial property buyers. I'd like to know when you will reduce the relevant duty to 0, because in the last 5 years, 10 years, the demand-side management has not been done well, especially for commercial and industrial sectors. You have to show us figures for the entire territory. How many commercial industrial properties are there, and what is the kind of transaction that you have seen? These people are buying the property for the sake of business conduct and also hire of employees. You are suppressing the demand and you are also penalizing them. For SMEs, they would have to actually mortgage their property to the banks in order to do financing. Now you prevent people from buying and selling, and you also ask the Hong Kong MA to reduce the mortgage rate to just 60%. And so there will be a credit crunch for the banks, because the banks would ask the SMEs to pay up the price difference. Never mind if you do not have an answer now, but I'd like to know whether you are going to do any study on the possible impact on business. Secondly, the biggest problem is for residential properties, you allow people to hold 1 unit. But for commercial and industrial properties, if you limit it to 1 unit, it doesn't make sense. You are lumping 2 types of things which are totally different for the Hong Kong's economy together, and you also think that people are also speculating on commercial industrial properties. If company buyers also use the property for the conduct of their own business, then you should allow them to be exempted. If they hold them for less than 2 years, meaning that they are using the property for speculation, then you can charge the AVD. The government is trying to manage speculation on property. I can accept that. But if you limit all transfer and sale of all kinds of property, I have reservations, especially about commercial and industrial properties. One property developer was trying to sell off its hotels. It doesn't mean that everybody is doing it. Don't penalize everybody else. I would object to this bill if you do not separate the 2 kinds of property, because you are going to affect business. Yesterday, everybody was speaking up about our competitiveness, and you are making life difficult for the business operators. We have dropped 2 places on the ranking list, and next year we might drop 10 places. Just now, the Transport and Housing Bureau said that it has dropped to 3,047 cases. Do you want it to go down to 0? There will be more supply, but transactions continue to fall. 3,427 cases. You think it is not low enough? You want it to drop to 1,000 cases? What is your long-term view of the situation? You need to give us all the data possible to prove that you are correct, especially for the commercial and industrial sectors. If you can't give us the answer now, you have to give us all the data and figures later on. DS. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your view and your request for information. We'll furnish the information later, but with regard to the policy, I'd like to tell you our starting point and our consideration. As a matter of fact, with regard to the non-residential market, in the past few years, there has been an overheating of the market indeed. In 2002, whether it be shop spaces, offices, or flatted factory buildings, in 2002, if you look at the price index, and if you compare that with last year's price index on a yearly basis, there has been an increase of 23 to 45%. And if you look at 2009, where there was a trough, actually the prices went up by 149 to 204%. We have to face up to this exuberance. But what about residential properties? You have to compare that for me. This time around, we cover residential as well as non-residential properties. This is because in terms of private residential properties, we want to manage demand. And if we don't do anything to tackle the exuberance in the non-residential sector, we are just going to transfer the exuberance to another sector of the market. Are you trying to tell people not to conduct business? Mr. Leung, please allow the DS to continue. The third point, this is going to answer Mr. Leung's request. Because of the increase in the price indices, actually it will mean a higher cost, a higher operating cost for the business sector. In fact, this measure is also to tackle the exuberance so that you can be helped in facing rising costs. That is why we are rolling out the measure. And as to the assessment of the impact, we can give more information to the committee later. And it was mentioned whether we want to achieve any target with regard to the private residential market. I can tell you that we keep a close watch of the property market situation, and we'll look at different factors, including the overall economic situation, the interest rate trend, and also the supply and demand of private residential property. These are all factors for our consideration. We are not going to preset any targets, but overall, we will have to look at the affordability for owning property amongst Hong Kong residents. Vicky, no supplement. The next member, Mr. James Toh. Chairman, I would like to give some careful thinking to Mr. Andrew Leung's point. While you do this, are you going to be able to stop all people who would like to legitimately conduct their business by buying a property? I can give you an example. I received this case of serious concern. I wouldn't call it a complaint. A very big Canadian insurance conglomerate which has operated in Hong Kong for almost a century. It wanted to buy property. As you know, it would also like to call it a certain tower with its own insurance company's name. It's a very famous insurance corporation, but I wouldn't like to state its name here. It was trying to buy a headquarters property using billions of dollars. And actually, the Chamber of Commerce of that country had lunch with us, and the consul himself showed concern. He was asking us, why is there this special measure? Now you can imagine, if you say people speculate on shop spaces and commercial property, and so that other people who really conduct the business have to face high property prices and high rental, and if you take a measure to tackle this particular problem of speculation, and if you like to put an end to the profits they can make, then so that the speculators will just leave the market because there is no profit, then in that way you drive away the speculators. But now you double the stamp duty. And for those who want to conduct business in Hong Kong, well, you can say they can rent their premises instead of buying their premises. But if they are committed to doing business in Hong Kong, and if they are looking at medium-term, long-term operation in Hong Kong, just like this insurance corporation or conglomerate, Of course, they have bought the property, and I'm sure they are not going to transfer the property as a conform mall. I cannot be 100% sure. Now, if the property prices will just shoot up, I don't know whether they are going to sell off their headquarters property 2-3 years down the road. I don't know. Because if they can make 100% profit, then I don't know. They may go for renting their premises. But I don't think they are going to sell off the property. However, they have entered the market. They have bought their headquarters premises. And you are charging them double stamp duty or AVD. So you are actually stopping the legitimate expansion of certain enterprises because they would like to make use of bigger premises. They may want to expand the business, they want to engage more brokers and agents, and yet you are arresting that kind of expansion. So have you thought about more targeted measures?
你而家呢
Rather than stopping everything. Of course, I can't understand you. Perhaps you could say that the headquarters building may be acquired for a few decades, and so the adjusted AVD rate shouldn't mean anything, and then the price or the value of the property may double or triple before they actually withdraw from Hong Kong. But not everybody can afford it, and if they find that they can't afford it, they may leave. So I really want to know if you have given thought to the ideas to which is the best solution for the problem. Mr. James Toh has made a very good point. In the course of deliberation, the administration would very much like to strike a balance. It is indeed a balancing act for the non-residential market. In particular, for the past 12 to 18 months' time, I think it was getting very buoyant. We've been in contact with foreign chambers of commerce. We have talked to those interested to come to Hong Kong to do business. Well, both the price as well as the rental of commercial properties have gone up drastically. Now, Mr. Toh is saying that we should be more focused. We should take out measures against the speculators. Of course, from time to time, we'll be checking whether there is a need for such specific measures. But then we want to do something to get immediate results, whether it is for investment or speculation for the non-residential property market. We want to come up with a very exceptional measures in this exceptional time so as to deal with the overheating of the market. Well, in fact, for those who have to pay the double stamp duty, of course, they get a heavier burden. But at the same time, if we don't come up with immediate and effective measures, I'm afraid that the non-residential property prices will continue to rise. And in fact, they would not be to the advantage of the business operation. Madam Chair, can you not do something to drive away the speculators when they don't find it profitable? What about the remaining? It is still not affordable to those who can't afford the double stamp duty. Now, either you drive away all the speculators so that whether they hold it for a long period or short period of time, they don't find it profitable. But what about the legitimate businessmen? They want to hold the properties. Now, you are sort of having a screening exercise. Those who can afford the double stamp duty, they can remain. For those who can't, then they will be sort of driven out. Mabel? Well, for the transfer, if we have the special stamp duty or something similar to that, we'll have to look at the duration for holding the property. If we are to introduce something similar, then the adjustment to the AVD rates would not take effect so immediately. Now, the overheating is really very serious. We want to generate immediate results. So the proposals in this bill we believe is going to work. Now, for factory buildings and shops, well, in fact, the speculation is very keen, and in fact, we can have more focused measures. For today, I think the demand management measure in the form of adjustments to the AVD rates, we believe that it is going to be effective. You say that it is very buoyant. Can you not give us the information? Yes. Dennis Kwok. Yes, I want to comment on the case of the non-residential properties. As we all know that for shop spaces and other non-residential properties, I think we know about the shortage, the high rentals. It is a very serious case. Under the proposal, we want to know whether we can have an exemption for non-residential properties like the purchase in Singapore if it is to be held for 3 years or more. That is, it is for long-term investment rather than for the purpose of speculation. So would you consider following the Singaporean practice, that is to give them exemption if it is a long-term investment lasting for 3 years or more? So the Singaporean practice, when we assessed our proposed policy, we did consider the overseas initiatives targeted at their respective markets. The way I understand is that in Singapore they don't actually give exemptions, but then they're talking about transfers at various stages subject to an additional stamp duty. In other words, an additional stamp duty will be imposed and a different rate will be imposed if the transfer or the transaction takes place within a particular period of time. Now, for us, for buoyancy in the non-residential property market and the need to have immediate results, both together means that we need to work on the AVD rates. Now, if there is clear evidence, and of course, we won't rule out the possibility that if necessary, we may have to borrow the experience from other jurisdictions. Then, Squawk, please give us the information. Please give us the data. Which data? They talked about speculation. They said that it's very heated. I think we need to get the data, check the data, and then we'll see if there is a need to follow the Singaporean practice so that long-term investment can be exempted. I think this is important. Other members have already said that for the proposal before us, it will dampen the desire to have long-term investment in non-residential properties, and it will harm our long-term competitiveness. It will also discourage the supply of more commercial properties. So please consider whether you should exempt non-residential properties for long-term investment. Yes, we asked for data to be given concerning the overheated property market, covering non-residential properties as well. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, I think it is difficult to be an AO nowadays because you can't really speak from the bottom of your heart. But anyway, this is their job. For important issues like this, I think we should have got the Secretary himself coming. I don't think they should ask the AOs to come to LegCo members. So, Madam Chair, please reflect this concern at the ExCo meetings. I have respect for the AOs. We appreciate their work. But I don't have respect for the policymakers who don't understand the market. When there's a flu, they would just administer some cyanide so that the patient get killed. So from this proposal, you can see that they don't actually know the market. Mr. Leung, Mr. Kwok, and even Mr. To, they are all very neutral, and yet they have come up with so many criticisms. It shows that the problem is serious. It's useless for us to say much because the government is not going to change. Yes, we want the government to take a hard stance, but then once the administration has made a blunder, they don't know how to rectify it, and then they will ask the AOs to come up to defend the administration. Madam Chair. Now, many international corporations are interested in your speech, but how come that your opening remarks are not in both languages? I think for legislative papers, they're always bilingual. So how come that your opening remarks are in Chinese only? Is it because you are worried that you don't want the overseas investors to understand you and listen to you? Now, for speculation, whether we're talking about speculation in properties or speculation in stocks, I don't think it should be regarded as a crime. Now, but you give us the impression that they are thieves. But then we must have economic development before we can have jobs for our citizens. Now you talk about the number of transactions dropping to 3,000. Now, do you know how many more people have become jobless as a result? Just now we talked about the Singaporean example. Do you actually know the details? You say that it is different. Now, Singapore has done a lot so as to attract the international corporations to set up their headquarters there. If they don't sell off the property in 3 years' time, then there will be partial refund. That's how they go about their SSD. And then the Law Society has also asked you to give further information, in particular in paragraph 4 of the submission. But today you don't seem to have addressed their concern, and yet you come without giving a reply. So it seems that you just dismissed their submission. What is your approach? Don't force the pro-establishment camp legislators to take a different view. Now, don't assume that we are going to support. Now, the BPA won't support you, Lam Tai Fai won't support you, and the Liberal Party may not support you. Even if you can get enough votes this time, you may not be able to do it next time. For the pro-establishment camp, we don't pledge allegiance to you forever. We will support whatever is worthy of our support, whatever is right, and we will say no to those that are not correct. Yes, you can do a blow to the property market, but don't just kill off everything. So I want to take this opportunity to tell the 1.2 million property owners. Now, you want to look at 10 to 20,000 properties that have been transacted. But then if we go back to the days of 1998 when there were negative assets as a result of the downturn of the property market, then you say that you have never thought about it in advance. Now, I don't think you should be suppressing all sorts of transactions. And to what extent would you like to drive down the property prices? You need to tell us such indicators. Would you come up with an English version of the speech? Mr. Sheikh is very good. He always have a lot to exchange with us. You have told us about your view? Well, for the opening remarks, well, that's to facilitate members to understand our speech. For the electoral brief, it is bilingual. Soon after the meeting, we will upload the English version of our opening remarks. We are keeping liaison with the overseas companies. Law Society has already made an appointment to meet with us. Come next week, we're going to talk to the Law Society about the final details as well as the issues arising from the future implementation. Well, in fact, we did go to the Law Society to give a briefing to them, and there was an initial exchange of views. And the Law Society has told us about worries in the implementation. Say a buyer may declare that he's a Hong Kong PR. When it is found later that it is incorrect, then the liability will be confined to the buyer. Well, in fact, the Law Society has told us about this possibility, and that's why we incorporated this into our bill.
And also we have the responsibility to introduce our policies here at the Bills Committee. After listening to members, we'll certainly go back and think again with regard to the policy itself and also the bill provisions. We will again look at them, and then we will come back and share with members our assessment. This is why we have the Bills Committee here. We will adopt a neutral stance, whether I am speaking as an AO or I'm speaking on behalf of the policymaker who is the secretary. We would like to have an honest exchange with members here. Chairman, I don't want to take up more time, but just one point. Chairman, you are also the chairman of the SSD and BSD committees. However, the Bureau is still unwilling to accept the point about non-locals buying property. We'll remind them at those committees that they have indirectly admitted this point at this meeting. It is said that if the directors declare themselves to the Hong Kong PR, if they operate limited companies, then it should be okay. Remind them of that point. And Ms. Chairman, it doesn't make sense if you upload anything on your website. We have to be able to find it on our LegCo website, because when we go to the official records, we only have the papers, not your further information. Third point, Law Society, it has written to us, but if you only have a meeting within your bureau, that is between you and the Law Society, we don't know what has transpired. So you must give us papers after the meeting. Don't just hold a closed meeting with them. There may be a breakthrough at the meeting, but you have to allow us to understand what has transpired. You have to write a paper to answer each and every question in the lawsuit paper for our benefit. Vicky, is it that you would like to speak? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to actually respond to a few members' remarks with regard to what I said at the beginning, and that is about the figures I quoted. Let me clarify that the objective of the new round of demand-side measures is not to take a broad brush approach to suppress all the demand. It's just that we don't want property prices to continue to rise, and that is why we are targeting a certain groups of buyers to make the cost more costly. And also we like to give priority treatment and attention to the desire to buy property on the part of Hong Kong permanent residents. And we don't want to transfer speculation from the residential market to the non-residential market. So the question was asked whether we would just like to suppress demand. Well, actually, we are targeting at the non or irrational exuberance of the market, and we are taking a double-pronged approach. We can see that there is also a problem with supply, and that is why we have taken the initiative to sell land to increase the supply of land and also housing. By land, we mean land for residential as well as non-residential property. At the beginning of the year, we said that there would be another round of measures to tackle the residential market. In fact, in previous papers submitted to LegCo, we already said that early this year, we could see that property prices again were going up. And compared to 2008, there has been a rise of a total of 120%. Therefore, with regard to residential units smaller than 100 square meters, there have been an increase of 2% in January 2013, and the cumulative increase has been more than 120%. So we hope that the new round of measures can prevent this reappearance of exuberance of the market in 2013. I hope I have explained why we have adopted this new round of demand-side management measures. Mr. Shek, would you like to wait for a second round? Well, I'd just like to tell them that every time you sell land, you go for higher and higher premium, but you don't talk about it. You just talk about property prices. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang, Chairman, I think it is reasonable to adopt demand-side management on residential property because there has not been a lot of supply in recent years, and that is why properties have shot up. I think that is reasonable. But then if you also like to control prices of non-residential property, well, you can compare it to the stock market. If the stock market is buoyant, does it mean that you want to suppress share prices as well? I think it's the same thing. This is about commercial investment and commercial transaction. And yet, you don't like to see it happen. You don't want non-residential property to gain value. I think this is beyond our understanding. You have adopted a laissez-faire policy, right? Well, I don't exactly object to intervention of the market if you only talk about residential property, but I would object to intervening into commercial transactions. So you are thinking of an overheated market and the public are not happy, so you want to do something. Is it that you really have received complaints about the high prices of commercial property, so people are not investing in Hong Kong? Is it that you have received that kind of complaints, but members are telling you the opposite, that the SMEs cannot buy the property for the conduct of business? It seems government policies have left the original track. We have adopted that laissez-faire policy for many years, but even if you are departing from it, you should not overdo it. Now you have this vide. You gave us very impressive figures. You say there has been a drop of transaction of residential properties, but the figures may not be the same for non-residential properties. However, you are just worsening the business environment, except the retail sector maybe. But investment-wise, this is a big barrier. Mr. James Toh talked about that particular example, the buying of property by an international or foreign conglomerate. So shouldn't you rethink this vide for non-residential property? People talked about Singapore. You can act like them. They would actually give partial refund or exemption for non-residential properties held for more than 3 years. So Singapore, of course, also intervenes into the market, but you are overdoing and actually outweighing Singapore in this. So is it that you have received complaints that the non-residential property market is also too exuberant, so you want to suppress the non-residential market as well? Who complained to you, please? Who would take the question? Mabel. I like to try to answer like this. Later on, I will be supplying papers to give you more information, but I'd like to share with you some figures. In the past 1 to 2 years, if we look at non-residential property, including retail shops, offices, and also flatted factory buildings. If you compare 2002 and 2011, if you look at the non-residential property, the increase has been 20 to 45%. That would be within 1 year. The index rose by 20 to 45%. And that goes to show that if the business sector would like to buy retail space, office, or flatted factory space, that would have a big impact on their operating cost. If you compare this with 2009, a trough in recent times, the increase can be as high as 200%. Of course, as Mr. Leung was saying, are we worried that such increase in the non-residential market would affect the public? Well, actually, that kind of exuberance would have an impact on the business environment, and the indices and the overheated number of transactions would mean that if we do not do anything to cool the market, there would be an impact on our financial system and monetary system. We have been talking to chambers of commerce and also the overseas chambers of commerce and also our associations, where we have heard that the rise in property prices and also in rental has made an impact on the business environment, and they are worried about it. Well, this is for an immediate effect. We understand that this is a strong measure. And indeed, when the AVD has to be paid, there would be a heavier tax burden. However, we have balanced the two basket of factors, and we still think that by having this measure, there will be an immediate effect on the non-residential property market as well, so that we can help improve the business environment for both international conglomerates and local SMEs. But I do understand Mr. Leung's point that yes, this may be also inconvenient for SMEs. We understand that we have done some impact assessment, and that is, for example, if we do not take these measures, and if later on there will be another round of measure for residential property market, then the exuberance will just be transferred to the non-residential property market. Next, Mr. Charles Mock. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I am always a believer in free economy. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh, sitting behind me, was saying that officials seem to be teaching businessmen how to do business. And I have been following the discussion, and it seems officials are telling us that you are even smarter than economists in projecting the trend of property prices, and you seem to be able to foretell what the impact of these measures will be. But to me, this is not easy to understand. I mean, why you are confident that these measures will certainly be effective? Like other members, I like to concentrate on the impact on the non-residential market. I have heard from the industries that these people are complaining. Actually, for business people, I'm including SMEs, property investment is a very normal business act. Very often, if a company would like to operate in the long term, they might want to own their own property, and they may not be involved in speculation. Some computer companies would also like to buy their own property, and that, in fact, is a factor affecting whether they can have long-term operation in Hong Kong. And I have received cases mainly from overseas companies, saying that they would like to make long-term investment and they would like to redevelop office buildings or industrial buildings, but this bill is going to affect their desire to do so. And they have told me that this may well be counterproductive, that the supply may well drop. As you know, rentals are going high. And are you saying that this measure will also suppress rentals? Or there may be different grades of office buildings and the impact may be different. And for certain grades of office buildings, the supply may decrease and therefore the rentals may go up. This is the first concern. Secondly, we think this is bad for our international reputation because we are a place of free trade, but it is not free anymore. We do not treat overseas companies as we used to.
Just now, Mr. Dennis Kwok mentioned that perhaps it would be desirable to have some fine-tuning. Say, for example, some sort of refund a few years down the road. So please consider this proposal, because in 6 to 7 years' time, the property owner may become a permanent resident. Anything is possible. And then other members also talked about the Singaporean practices. Maybe we aren't too clear about the comparison between the Singaporean practice and Hong Kong's proposals. So I hope the administration will have a more detailed policy comparison between Hong Kong and Singapore, so that we can find out whether their provisions are more draconian or not, and we want to know about the effect of their policies. Of course, we can't say that we're identical because the size and scale of the market, the pressure, the duration, amount of things are different. But still, we believe that we need more data for comparison. Otherwise, everybody is trying to act like an economist, saying that adopting a particular initiative, you will get a particular outcome. Well, I think we aren't taking an exam in economics. Otherwise, we've all become a Nobel Prize winner in the field of economics. Well, can the Bureau tell us about the practice in Singapore or other jurisdictions where they have demand management initiatives? And please also come up with your assessments for the reference by members. Yes, indeed, this can be done. We do have some information with us. Maybe it's better to give the information in writing than just making a few comments here verbally. Well, for Singapore, in relation to investment and inflow of capital, Singapore does have some focused initiatives. I'm sure we admit that the government can never be a better businessman than the business sector. We are not here to forecast how the market will develop. Indeed, we are subject to an interaction of different factors, both local and external. We have been sharing the data with you so as to update you on the latest situation. Well, since the announcement of this policy, which was end of February, we are talking about a short period of a few months' time. If we are to assess the effectiveness or otherwise of the policy, I'm afraid it is too early. I just want to say that the administration is watching closely the different factors of the market, like interest rate, operating environment, the number of properties in supply, and then for a policy to be effective, it will certainly bring about impacts of various extent and inconvenience to different stakeholders. The government cannot control the market, but will be more than happy to share the data with you so as to let you have a better idea about the latest position, and then that will facilitate our communication. Madam Chair, of course it's difficult to assess the impact since it was only introduced late February. I won't assume that the comparison with Singapore will be a very ideal comparison, but still will be interested to know about their initiatives as well as the effect of their policies. Mr. Tony Chair, Madam Chair, for the property prices, it is said that they are too exorbitant, and it is said this is overheated, it is an exceptional time, and so the government has resorted to exceptional measures. Speculation won't be good for the property market, be it residential or non-residential. Now, the colleagues have already said that we are sort of making it most expensive. Now you have the ad valorem duty rates, you have the enhanced SSD, and you have the BSD. I'm afraid that you may be harming the innocent. In fact, there are people who buy the properties for investment. Now, for non-residential properties, I'm afraid that for properties held in the name of companies, well, for residential properties, you still have the BSD. Now, if somebody is to hold the property in the name of a company, you have a lot of savings in terms of the tax to be paid. Now, you pay the AVD, but thereafter you don't need to pay because you can just transfer the shares. Now, there won't be exemption even if the non-residential property is to be bought by Hong Kong PR. I think the government needs to reconsider this. I think the policy here is to cut short-term speculation, but then you are in effect encouraging property transactions in the name of companies, because by transferring the shares, they can have a lot of savings in the form of tax payable. I think this is unfair. For the exemptions, now it is said that for Hong Kong PRs, if you buy a property, if you do not already hold a property, and if you want to replace a property, you give them a window of 6 months. But I don't think you can cover the uncompleted flats, because you need to sign the documents. Now, 6 months, where do you plug the idea of 6 months? Is it reasonable? I also agree with what many members have said. In the case of investment, can you not sort of allow them exemption after holding it for a period of time? I will insist on having this, because if it is not speculation, if it is for long-term investment, please don't dampen their desire, and don't make it so expensive that they're discouraged. Is it possible to have a mechanism to refund the AVD? Ms. Chen, I would like to thank Mr. Chair for his questions. There are a number of them. Now, for this demand management initiatives, now we are making use of we are having the AVD. Our starting point is that we want something simple, direct, and something that will generate immediate results, so as to cope with the overheated property market. Well, for the BSD and the SSD, we are not going to introduce them to the non-residential properties. We just want something which is simple and direct and that can generate immediate results. Mr. Chair talks about the implications of holding properties in the name of companies. I think when you deliberated the other stamp duty amendment bill, there was a lot of discussion. Now, we are giving priority to the housing needs of the Hong Kong PRs who do not already hold other residential properties. They only pay the existing AVD rates. But then if a resident holds other residential properties, then there will be double duty. We don't apply a different set of criteria if the property is to be held in the name of a company. Now, for the AVD, the consideration is that, in fact, we apply the same criteria as that under the BSD. So I hope members will understand that we are being consistent, be it the policy or be it the legal provisions. As to the acquisition before disposal and the sort of grace period provided, of course, we don't want to allow for too long a period of time for the replacement, because individuals may own more than one residential properties at the same time, and this goes against our policy intention. We have tried to balance the needs, because there are people who have a genuine need to replace their properties. So we believe that 6 months would be reasonable as a period of time so as to facilitate their need to replace their property. Mr. Lam Tai Fai. This is the second meeting. I was referring to the Bills Committee for the SSD and the BSD. I used to be very vocal. I tried to send out the messages to the government, but after a few rounds of discussion, I now come to realize that the government is not going to budge in relation to the SSD, BSD, and the AVD. So this is going to be a replica of the old age living allowance, irrespective of the number of meetings held, irrespective of the views expressed by the different political parties. They won't even budge an inch. They always say that they understand us, they know our concerns. I think they understand their own point. They are trying to take care of their own concerns. So they are not going to listen to us. Now for this one, this is going to be negative vetting. We don't want to resort to filibustering. But then it will be best if we have filibustering, if we can't agree among ourselves. If you have no other alternatives, then perhaps in order to play the role of checking and balancing, we have to resort to filibustering. So you are compelling me to learn the tactics from the radicals like long hair. Now, what I feel is that you are only doing academic exercises. Mr. Sheikh put it very well. You don't actually know the market, but then you give us your data, your justifications. So it seems that you are fully justified, because you are saying that you don't want the risk to further increase. You don't want to jeopardize our macroeconomy and our financial stability. But you have to remember that when the property market collapses, our economy will be jeopardized. No one will come to invest. No one will come to do the shopping. Now the property market has dampened and you are feeling good. But in fact, everything is so quiet. It's not good. If we don't have transactions, then it is too quiet. It is, in fact, many related trades have seen a lot of unemployment. Yes, we need to give priority to the housing needs of the Hong Kong PRs, but I just cannot see how your policy can let people get a flat earlier, like going to the PR age. I think the only result is that there won't be any transactions, which economies tells you that by having no transactions, you will be able to house the PRs. If they can't afford it, what's the point? And you're asking the banks to squeeze the credit. So I think the government's philosophy of governance is very odd. The government is not going after a balance between demand and supply. You just want to suppress it. When you run out of infant formula, you impose a ban, and then you disallow people to come here to give birth to babies. You don't allow people to have tertiary education. Now you have a shortage in housing supply. Now you introduce draconian measures to suppress the demand. What's even more worrying is that you're going to introduce new measures any time. So investors have been turned away. Now for the SSD, BSD, they think that, well, they can be incorporated into the cost. And yet it will be very difficult to plan your investment if you are threatened with more measures at any time. Businessmen can't even think of saving enough money to buy their business property.
You seem only to be issuing threats. You said you would like to suppress the speculators, but then the users, the real users, are also jeopardized. You have thought of new ways to separate the buyers, the real users, and the speculators. Maybe you can say if you prove yourself to be a genuine buyer, you will get a refund from us. And like 3 years, 4 years down the road, if you prove yourself to be a genuine buyer, then we'll refund all the BSD, SSD, AVD, whatever. But now you only adopt this across-the-board measure that is executive-led, so that there will not be people complaining that they cannot buy property. But you have to separate the users from the speculators, and you only target the speculators. You cannot lump the two together and make life difficult for both groups. You must abide by the principle of free trade. Have I run out of time? No, continue, never mind. Because just now I gave almost 7 minutes to each member, and this is only fair. So if you insist that you want to go ahead with this bill, I want you to think of ways and means to really just combat the speculators. Don't say that it is difficult by way of implementation to separate the two groups of people so both are to be buried together. I'm sure you can think of ways not to affect the real buyers, especially the SMEs. Now, if that's the case, nobody can own property. Everybody will be just renting property from now on. You say if the costs will go down and rentals will also go down, but people have a different mentality. Hong Kong businessmen also would like to own their own premises. And if you wouldn't even budge like the OALA, the OH living allowance, then you should also be strict with the speculators. DS? I would just reply briefly. We, yes, considered the implementation side, but we also have to look at the starting point for this policy. Whether it be an individual or a company, if it is about buying non-residential property, how can we know whether it is for their own use or for investment, so that there will be some return on the investment for the conduct of business or for short-term speculation? We can't tell. There may be many reasons behind people buying non-residential property. But for residential property, the purpose will be clearer. It is easy to tell because people want to own the residential property for inhabitation. It is not that we have not thought about this. It is not that because of implementation difficulties, we have not thought of another measure. But then the starting point of the policy is also an important consideration. We would like to have a direct, simple measure that will have immediate effect on the overheated property market. This is a very major consideration. And implementation-wise, it's just like residential property. If we can easily delineate the exemptions and who should be given the exemptions, well, we have done that for residential property, but then for non-residential property, we think the situation would be so much more complicated. And if we also offer exemptions, then I believe the effect of the measure to cool the overheated market will be rolled back. Next, Mr. James Teen. Sorry, I'd like to declare interest. I don't own non-residential property, but I own a property consultant company, and I may give advice on property transactions. Mr. Lam as well. Yes, I have to declare interest. I own residential as well as non-residential property. Good. Mr. James Tien. Chairman, I also have to declare interest. I am in the property business. I live in my own property and I also invest in different kinds of property. Chairman, with regard to the property market, starting with the SSD and then the BSD, and then this one, AVD, the administration's explanation is that they would like to suppress the overheated property market. If one measure doesn't work, they would roll out another measure. It sounds like a good policy, but for investors, people would ask, why I want to come to Hong Kong to make the investment? Because it seems your policies are changing all the time. It seems you don't know how to deal with the situation and you are changing your policies. But then we like to have stability and prosperity, don't we? And in terms of stability, the foreign investors would say, look, they are very confused already by your different measures. If you have really done your consideration and you only roll out one single measure, then it will be much better. Now the situation is really complicated with all these different measures. Even for local residents who like to buy property for inhabitation or for investment, it is already very confusing. And also, it is even more confusing for foreign investors. And I'm sure our ranking will continue to fall amongst the cities in the world. It seems you have been compelled to roll out different measures. Say if I have bought property and then you introduce another measure, and I wouldn't know what to do. I think the CE really should take another look. You should not be taking all these actions just to suppress the property market. Second point. You now say that property prices have somewhat come down. But is that the case? I'd like to give you an example. If a property is worth $10 million, they only paid 4.5% in the past, and now 8.5%, so over $800,000 now. And the buyer would be paying more, but then the seller would not be getting back as much. And then the administration may say, look, the property prices have really fallen because the transaction price has been lowered. But then for the buyer, he has to pay the double tax. It is just that the seller has received less. You say you'd like to help Hong Kong PR to get property, but the property prices have not become cheaper. It is just that you have charged the AVD and the money has gone into the government coffers. I think by saying the property prices have fallen, you are misleading the public. For the buyer, they are paying $10.45 million. The property has not been cheaper by 1 cent. You are not helping them at all. Second point, the SCMP has talked about Manulife in its front page, the Canadian insurance conglomerate. And even the Canadian consulate has written a letter to members of this Bills Committee. Now, of course, this is a very big transaction involving $4.5 million. They have put aside $191 million to pay stamp duty, but now they have to pay $383 million. And in fact, different overseas chambers of commerce are speaking out against this measure. They have always regarded Hong Kong as a comparatively free market for investment, and which is also a stable market. But now you seem to not to know what you are doing. You are putting out measures one after another, day after day. So will investment be affected? The rentals are already high, and we should, in fact, welcome overseas investments. But then you are changing your tactics all the time. I think this is a very bad sign. The other overseas chambers of commerce, including the U.S. American Chamber and the British Chamber of Commerce, they may be thinking along the same lines. They may also be speaking out against the measure because of this very big transaction that has attracted attention. So we think that if you look at it from the angle of investment, whether it be a residential or non-residential property, for investment, whether it be overseas investors, etc., I think you should deal with it in a different way. I understand that the BSD was targeted at mainland big spenders. But look at this Canadian example. Manulife has bought this property in Kwun Tong for $4.5 billion. They are doing it for long-term investment. So are you sending out the message to our international investors that they should not continue with this kind of investment? New York, London, and Hong Kong are always mentioned in the same breath. And as you know, people from all over the world go to New York and London also to make investment. So when you think about investment coming into Hong Kong, don't just have mainlanders in mind. Don't just try to target the mainland big spenders, but at the same time you also affect Australia, Canada, and US, and also Europe, including Britain. I think you have to rethink the entire measure. I think the best way is for you to increase the supply of land. You are not auctioning office use land. You are only tackling public rental housing for the public, but you are not putting out land for hotels and offices. What is going to happen to international investors? They won't go to Tseung Kwan O to buy up 400 small units for residential purposes. They may be buying up large office space. So CY Leung is the CE. We should not just allow his measures to affect the market within 1 year or within 4 years. Thank you. DS, I'd like to respond to 1 or 2 points as to the Canadian insurer and also the Canadian consulate. We have met them. We have explained the bill to them and also the rationale behind. Mr. Tian, I can subscribe to the point that if we continue to roll out different measures, then things will become complicated, and the public and investors alike may not be able to grasp the entire mechanism and the new tax regime. This mechanism of the AVD is actually very simple. We have the AVD, the SSD, and the BSD. And indeed, we also think that we should keep our tax system simple. We share your view. And I'd like to tell members that in respect of non-residential property, what we are doing now is to just increase the tax rate for ad valorem stamp duty to keep it simple. And unlike residential property, we are not adding the enhanced SSD and BSD to non-residential property because that would only complicate matters. And secondly, property prices. The public have to pay the AVD they might have to pay out more in dollar terms. But I also like to point out that this AVD is to be implemented in such a way that we would take care of Hong Kong PRs who do not own any Hong Kong property. And we have looked at the figures for the past 3 years. If we look at the past 3 years, for Hong Kong PRs who bought property, residential property, we saw that 50% or over 50% of them did not own any residential property when they bought residential property. So the impact would be on less than half of the people, because you could see that 50% or over would not be affected. The old regime would be from $100 to 4.5%. And this is to show the original purpose of the policy. We are going to take care of this group of people. But for those who already own residential property, we have to balance the desire to have their own residential property and also to manage demand. And then for Hong Kong PR who already own property, we are going to ask them to pay the double stamp duty as well. As for overseas investors, we have met the consulates and also the relevant investor. We have heard them, and as I said, maybe I should not repeat myself, we actually already did the balancing act and also the investing environment.
For overseas investors wishing to buy non-residential properties in Hong Kong, they will look at the business environment, they will look at the price level, they would of course also look at the stamp duty rate. But we won't sort of speculate on the reason behind the decision to buy properties. I think a member would like to move a motion at today's meeting. So just want to say that we are supposed to end by 12:45 since we started at 10:45. Next to speak will be Kenneth Leung. I have already taken a look of the wording of the motion. It is relevant, so I'm going to distribute the wording to members. Kenneth Leung, let me make a declaration. As to the case of Manulife, I have been consulted. Well, I was consulted as to whether there was a way to enable them to pay less stamp duty. I looked at the case. I found it difficult to give any advice. There are 2 points I want to make here. Just now, James Tian talked about our economy and the certainty of our legislation. 3 measures have already been launched. We didn't know whether there is another one or there are another 2 in your pocket. If you can't suppress it, maybe in October this year you will launch another initiative, and then come January you're going to launch another one. So for investors coming to invest in Hong Kong, I think they have to be more cautious. You are sort of putting them off. And then as to the negative vetting mechanism, well, for this sort of draconian measure, whenever you make an announcement, it will be implemented. For those who are already in the course of transaction, such taxpayers are not being treated fairly. So I hope that in future, when the government is to implement this sort of tax-related policy, like introducing a new kind of tax or adjusting the tax rate, please bear this point in mind. Who is going to answer? Just now, Mr. Leung said that when we introduce relevant measures, of course we have to take into account the prevailing circumstances. When the property market is such that we need to make timely adjustments. And if we believe that we need to withdraw certain initiatives or increase or adjust the rate, we will certainly do so. In overseas tax jurisdictions, again, they will work through legislation or subsidiary legislation so that there can be timely adjustment, and then it will be sort of more effective in responding to the market conditions. I think it's a reasonable way to go about it. For the negative vetting, well, for the enhanced SSD, after we have made an announcement, we will make it effective instantly. But then before the enactment of the bill, the IRD would not be collecting the duty from the relevant persons. Well, the demand note would only be sent out after the enactment of the bill, and then the IRD would be justified to collect the revenue. All right, second round of questions. Mr. James Toh. Madam Chair, a number of points here. First of all, Mr. James Tien and other members have made a point, and I think the government must consider it, that if you continue to do something which make it difficult for people to foretell what policies you have got, and then you send a strong message to the overseas investors that they are at a loss as to what to do, and then they may be surprised by suddenly introduced policies. And even for long-term investors and for long-time businessmen, they may be caught by surprise and they may have to pay a few $100 million more. Then the overall investment atmosphere may lack certainty. Now come to some final details. The DS told us that there were statistical data. It was said that half of the residents at the time of acquisition of property do not already own another residential property. I want to know whether such a figure has ever been given to us. I don't think so, right, Ms. Chen? As to the impact assessment, well, when we do quote this when we issue our electoral brief. Don't quote. I think it's better to give us the figures. I think you're talking about 3 years' time, right? How many residents already own 1 or 2 residential properties at the time of acquisition? I think that would have a bearing. Second point. Now, there are a number of scenarios in which you get an exemption. If it is a replacement, then you will be exempted. But as long as you do it within a certain time frame. What about non-residential properties? What if I want to replace my office? Say, for example, there's a property 300 square feet in size. Now, there's a very humble one costing a few $1 million. Now they are interested to get one valued at $300 million. Well, as long as you dispose of the small one, the existing one, then you'll be given exemption. So it's not a sort of comparable replacement. The only matter is that you sort of dispose of the existing property in time. So, do you think that this would constitute a problem? And then from the businessman's point of view, I came in to refer to the case of Manulife. I, at that time, didn't want to name names, but since others have already exposed the identity. So now, if they used, or what if there's this case, there wasn't a headquarters, now they want to buy their own headquarters building, or they found that the office space is inadequate. Why aren't you allowing exemption for possession of one commercial property. Now, you find it fine to have one residential property, but not so for commercial property. Now, it is really of a substantial scale, so they really need such a large, big premises. Now, for the exemption given to replacement, you want to safeguard the genuine uses. But what about non-residential properties? If we are talking about a cafe owner, he may also want to replace his premises. Why not any exemptions? Others may also want to ask questions for the first time, and then I'll give the floor to Andrew Leung for the motion. Ms. Chen. Mr. James Toh talked about Hong Kong permanent residents holding residential properties at the time of acquisition. Yes, we'll give the information later. Replacement properties. Well, we are increasing the ABD rates for both residential and non-residential properties. Well, we take into account the fact that when a Hong Kong PR buys a property, there is this perspective of housing need and home ownership. And that's why we have come up with the exemptions for replacing your property. And therefore, the same cannot be applied to non-residential properties. I think you would understand that is, for the acquisition of non-residential properties, you say that it's for self-use, other than being used as the place of business. It may also be acquired for the purpose of investment, so as to generate profits for the sake of the business. Or it can be acquired for the purpose of staff quarters for his employees, and then for a group. Maybe you want to suggest that exemption should be given to one premises as the place of business. But what about the group may need a number of premises? It will be difficult to draw the line as to what is reasonable. For non-residential properties, there will be a variety of properties. But then for Hong Kong PRs, replacing the residential properties, I think this is in line with the need to give priority to Hong Kong PRs wishing to address their housing needs. No, I never said that there should be exemption for one company in a group. Now, if an individual is to buy a shop for the purpose of his business operation, then it is quite different. You need to buy your property to run your business. There is also a need, a genuine need. So I can't understand you. Now, if someone buys a property to live in, why can't we apply the same logic for a person to buy a property to run his business? To live in, that's when he spends his night. To run his business, for him to do his business during daytime. Now, you just spend $2,000 to hold a company and to buy a company, and that can hold a property worth $3 billion or $300 million. Tommy Cheung, I must give him to the floor to speak for the first time, and then back to Andrew Leung. Madam Chair, I have many questions, but then I've read the motion from Andrew Leung. Would you put the matter to vote immediately? Because I must leave, so I don't mind if you give the floor to Andrew Leung instead. Yes, if members agree, then I will give the floor to Andrew Leung, who will then elaborate on his motion. I've been reminded by the clerk that you need to amend the wording of the motion to say this Bills Committee blah blah blah. It doesn't matter, I can amend the wording. I think members have all asked questions clearly. Now, concepts pertaining to residential properties cannot be applied to non-residential properties for own use. Now, the government would like to suppress speculation. I have views. I have my views, but not strong views. But then, if a businessman working for the economic development of Hong Kong would like to get a property to run his business, and if you don't allow that, then this is a wrong concept. And I hope that the government will withdraw the bill, go back, think carefully, make a distinction between residential and non-residential, make a distinction between the two scenarios. It's not that the pro-establishment camp is in support and then the opposition camp is in opposition. I think across the board people are saying no to it. So why don't you withdraw it, go back, reconsider it, and come back? Now, suppressing speculation, we don't find a problem. But then if you stand in the way of the business development, we do have strong views. So I move this motion. This Bills Committee proposes to the government that the government should withdraw the bill and then come back. Does any member wish to speak on the motion? I cannot support the motion, but I have many questions in my mind. I want to listen to the administration comprehensively. Many questions have been asked. The answers are still being awaited. I don't think I've come to the conclusion that the administration must withdraw the bill.
And I have not come to the stage to say that the Democratic Party would object the bill if it is not withdrawn. I would like to continue to scrutinize the bill, and I would still like to listen to the administration. And in order to do that, if the motion is to be voted on, I can only vote against it. But my stance is that if you do not separate genuine users and speculators, I would really want to talk more with you about it. I think there should be a better mechanism or measure to help the genuine users, and I'm including non-residential users, so the property prices will be stabilized. Would any other member like to speak? The administration. First, from the angle of the Bureau, we respect members' views and motions put forward at a Bills Committee. Mr. Leung was saying that some wording can be discussed. I like to say that, in fact, this is the first meeting for the two sides to exchange information and also to ask and respond to questions. In fact, the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2013 also includes residential property, non-residential property, and also advancing the charging of stamp duty, etc. Just now we were concentrating on the non-residential property market, but in fact we should also not forget the suppressing of demand in the residential market. Given the wording of the motion, which says that the administration should be asked to withdraw the bill, but in fact this is just the first meeting for an exchange. Maybe this motion is premature because we are still going to provide information. We have heard members' views and questions at this Bills Committee, and we will go back and do an assessment of impact and also provide data and figures. Next time we are going to listen to deputations. So I hope members will consider whether this is an appropriate time to vote on such a motion given its wording. Okay, let me also state my views. As the administration said, this is our second meeting as a Bills Committee, but in fact this is really the first opportunity for an exchange. Members have asked a lot of questions, including whether there is a better way to delineate between users and investment. I understand the business community now have a problem, and I hope the administration will consider one point. Singapore has a similar measure, but it has selected to provide a refund or exemption mechanism. So why don't we consider the Singaporean approach? Because now you give members and the business community the impression that you don't want to separate users from speculators. So I think you should consider that. And Mr. Leung, I hope you will consider whether this is a little too early. Of course, I will tackle the motion according to the standing orders or rules of procedure. It is said that if half or over half of members present would agree that we should tackle the motion here and now, then I would act according to that ROP and allow the motion to be processed at this committee. Mr. Leung, would you like to add? Well, I don't have much to add except to insist that we process the motion now. In fact, the administration hasn't lobbied us in any way. And I think the DS is saying that she has already thought through the issue, and if there are enough votes, the bill will just go ahead, like what Mr. Lam Tai Fai said. But we have strong views, and I want the administration to go back and think again, give us all the data and figures, and lobby members. So you want the motion to go ahead, right, Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh? Chairman. The DS said it very nicely. But the thing is that it is not that we don't want to give views. It is not that we don't want to listen to them. But this administration cannot be tolerated anymore. We cannot put up with it anymore. The same can be said about SSD and BSD. I hope we can vote on the motion right away. Okay, according to the ROP, I'd like to ask how many members would like us to process the motion now. Well, it's clear that it's the majority. Okay, Chairman, may I please add one point? Just now, Mr. Leung and also Mr. Sheikh said that when I responded to Mr. Lam Tai Fai, that we are unilateral and determined in our view. No, sorry, she should not be filibustering. I need to go. I cannot wait. This is not a binding motion. They can turn a deaf ear to us. She can throw it into the rubbish bin, even if we carry it, and then she will be here again next week. There is no problem. Don't waste time. I'd just like to straighten the record to say that I did not say that we are determined and nevertheless going ahead with it unilaterally. Okay, we'll put the motion to the vote. Those who are in support? For those who object? And I will not vote on it, so the motion is carried. Okay, does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh? I hope that all the information will be furnished to us, and also how you answer the letter of the Law Society. You should give us all the relevant papers. And also whether you have done any research, whether you have done any market impact assessment, you should give us everything. Right. In fact, we have requested a lot of information from the administration, and the clerk will liaise with the administration after the meeting, and the administration should furnish the information ASAP. And the administration should know that you should furnish the information without delay, so members have enough time to read the information and so that we can ask further questions. We have to give members reasonable time to read the information. Mr. Sheikh, I'd like the administration to let us know who have objected to the AVD. I know a lot of people have written to the administration. Well, no problem. Let us ask them. Later on, we are going to have a public hearing. Well, yes, we have invited deputations, but some may not be coming. However, the administration should have received letters of objection. I think they should make them available. No problem. Okay, I'd like to remind members that the Bills Committee has also received 3 papers which have been forwarded to the administration. This is for your information. Members also have those papers. And also, on the 13th of June, a Thursday, at 9 a.m., we are going to meet with deputations. Up till the 29th of May, 14 deputations have registered their interest to come, and the deadline for making a registration is the 3rd of June. If you know any organization is interested, please remind them about the deadline for registration. If there is nothing under AOB, the meeting is adjourned here. Thank you very much.